Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Wells, let me walk through a little bit of a timeline. I've got a broader question. It was December the 8th of last year that FireEye notifies everyone, hey, there's a problem. We've detected what we consider a foreign actor that's somewhere that is ingrained in our system. A few days later, on December the 13th, FireEye announced that it was compromised through SolarWinds through the Orion platform. And then it starts this chain of looking at who has SolarWinds, who has used the Orion platform, what does that look like, and it suddenly gets announced. A lot of federal entities have that, a lot of private entities have that, and it changed down from there. My question is, had FireEye not found this December the 8th, would it still be operational today?
I don't know that we're capable of answering that question fully. There may be other ways in which either the public or the private sector could have identified that activity. But I've said before that our private sector cybersecurity capability in this country is a true asset, one that helps the overall security of our country every day. And we are lucky to have firms like FireEye and the other cybersecurity firms out there who are looking for vulnerabilities, looking for potential compromises, making the government aware to ensure that we can get ahead of it. And I will just add one change to your timeline, which is FireEye notified us of potential compromises earlier than December 8th, so that we could begin to understand what happened, begin to look at our own networks, and we are really appreciative of the partnership that we have with FireEye and other players.
So the challenge is the vulnerability here as we walk through this, because had FireEye not found this and said this is in our system, we've experienced an attack on it, and then start trying to figure out where it came from and realizing that it could be in a lot of other places that they had it, it was in other places as well. The challenge that we have is how do we actually get onto this earlier, and what systems do we have in place? I understand zero-day attacks and that there are some things that are entirely novel. I get that, as this was through the process. But when I go through your testimony earlier and what your written testimony is, there's a lot of detail about the response, and it seems to be very detailed. That CISA's work in response to this campaign has 4 lines of effort: scoping, sharing the information, detection techniques, short-term remediation, long-term strategic recovery. You're very focused on what happens after the fact. My question is, are we that focused on before, on detection? Walk me through the process that CISA has in place in working with contractors and with government entities to be able to help determine things in advance. I know they're there. Walk me through those.
Sure. So I think that there are approaches that we're taking now, and then there are additional ways in which we want to improve our ability to detect compromises earlier. So right now, the federal government, as you know, deploys technology on the perimeter of the federal enterprise, looking for signatures of known malicious activity. When we get those, we then work with the agency where that incident is being targeted to look inside of their systems. What are they seeing? Because they have deeper insight in terms of what's happening on their individual networks. In the future, as I've talked about previously, we need to move deeper into networks. So an event like SolarWinds, you're never going to detect at the perimeter. You're never going to detect at the edge. Right. You need to be looking on individual hosts, on individual servers and workstations for when those start to behave in anomalous fashions. So should your SolarWinds device all of a sudden start talking on an encrypted channel with the server outside of your network that it's never spoken to before and probably shouldn't, that could get alerted more quickly. And so as Senator Hassan mentioned, the deployment of things like endpoint detection and response tools on those critical devices inside of networks will give both the agencies and CISA deeper insight into what's happening there and be able to alert and cue us more quickly to incidents like this. Again, there's no silver bullet, but we believe that additional layers of visibility, additional improvements in network segmentation, additional improvements in how networks are architected and configured continues to drive adversaries to more complicated and sophisticated attacks, reduces the likelihood that they are successful, and increases the likelihood that we will detect them more quickly.
So which agencies are leading that effort right now? Because obviously any agency could already do that.
Sure, and most agencies have begun to deploy things like endpoint detection tools on their network. What we are using is the additional money provided through the American Rescue Plan Act to really expand that more quickly to more agencies. And again, partly this is a funding issue, and then partly this is how do you take that information that's coming from these new tools and sensors, and how do you integrate it into improved visibility and action inside of agencies and with CISA. And so that is the work that we are undertaking today.
So individual contractors and certification of those contractors, of what they have to achieve, and then accountability for those contractors when they fail to achieve those.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that we need to do in the supply chain realm. The government is actively working on a cyber executive order that will begin to address some of that. But we know that the improvements in the supply chain, particularly for federal agency software, is critical, and we think it'll have tangible benefits for the private sector as companies who sell to the federal government make systemic improvements that will benefit everyone.
Right. 6 years ago, we were in a conversation in a hearing just like this, where many federal agencies were using virus protection programs that it was discovered that all of their data is routing through Russia. And this room was a little stunned by the whole process to be realized that we didn't verify that no one was really checking those outside contractors, and that many agencies were using materials like that. So I guess my question is now 6 years ago, as we continue to make progress on this, and it has been chipping away for several years, at what point do we get to the balance that we know we're verifying what federal computers are actually using, and the providers that are actually doing that, what they're doing with that data? And then also not making this so incredibly difficult that we only have one or two primes that are out there and expose ourselves to having very few resources that are out there and very little innovation. You've got to strike a difficult balance where we actually are doing oversight but not driving people out of the market.
Yes, and there has been significant improvement in both agencies and across the government looking at supply chain risk management in a more thorough way. And Congress has also provided a number of tools for us, like the Federal Acquisition Security Council, where DHS, DOD, and the ODNI, who are looking at and assessing the potential risk posed by vendors for the federal government, either on the civilian side, the intelligence side, or the defense side, can make decisions and promulgate guidance for the rest of the agencies to remove high-risk software or hardware from their networks. That work is actually just getting started now, but provides us a real mechanism and a framework to actually rid our networks of anything that we think is high risk. CISA has obviously taken action in the past, for example, removing Kaspersky software across the civilian executive branch when we believe that the risk posed by using that software was too high. So we'll take action in the interim. But we now have a more dedicated process to examine the exact issue that you're raising and systematically address it across the entire U.S. government.
Okay, thank you.